From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Tuesday, May the 11th, 2021. The massive onslaught of rockets fired from Palestinian terror groups in Gaza at Israel intensified last night and continued unrelentingly throughout the day today and into tonight. As of approximately 8 p.m. Israel time tonight, the IDF said 630 rockets had been launched toward Israel since just after 6 p.m. Israel time yesterday evening. Of those, 480 rockets were fired into Israeli territory. 150 fell short and landed inside Gaza. Of the 480 fired into Israel, some 200 were intercepted by the Iron Dome. Keep in mind, the Iron Dome missile defense battery does not target rockets that are determined to hit open areas. The areas hardest hit this morning and afternoon were Ashdod and Ashkelon, as well as Sderot, with Ashkelon seeing serious damage to a number of homes as well as to a school, which was fortunately empty at the time. There were dozens of Israelis injured and 2 were killed in the city, reportedly in separate incidents. One of the victims was named as 32-year-old Sumia Santosh, originally from India, who lived with and was a caregiver to an elderly Israeli woman in Ashkelon in a home that suffered a direct rocket hit. Rocket attacks throughout the day today sounded red alert sirens, sending residents running for shelter, and in some cases, forcing them to the ground to take cover. Several videos show such instances of police responding to a rocket that had just landed in Ashkelon today, dropping to the ground as sirens sounded once again. And in Sderot, where a brother used his own body to protect his young sister, dropping to the ground on the sidewalk during a siren there. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed the Israeli public earlier today after holding a situational assessment where he vowed that the response to Gaza terrorists would continue and would increase. Now, the IDF has been carrying out and continues to carry out retaliatory targeted strikes in Gaza in response to the rocket barrages in what is being called Operation Guardian of the Walls. 23 Palestinians were said to have been killed in the Israeli airstrikes today, the majority of whom the IDF said were members of Hamas and of Palestinian Islamic Jihad, including 3 commanders of Islamic Jihad, among them the head of the rocket arsenal, among those responsible for the rocket attacks. The Gaza Health Ministry reported that several Palestinian children had been killed by the airstrikes, but the IDF said it was more likely that they were casualties of rockets fired by Palestinian terrorists that fell short and exploded within Gaza, as the IDF does everything in its power to avoid civilian casualties and issues warnings to civilians before sites are hit. Spokesperson for the Israeli Consulate General in New York, Itai Milner, emphasized that fact, saying Israel is working extremely hard to reduce any civilian casualties, and that Palestinian casualties of any kind are something Israel mourns and regrets deeply. International spokesperson of the IDF, Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus, reporting today from a building hit by rocket fire in Ashkelon, also stressed the IDF's great efforts to avoid civilian casualties.
The sad reality is that Hamas and Islamic Jihad have purposely embedded themselves within the civilian population. They are using their civilians, Palestinians, their homes, the schools, the mosques, the hospitals, and everything else that they have at their disposal in Gaza. They, the terrorists, are using them as human shields and making it virtually impossible for us to strike only those involved in military activity. I can assure you that the IDF is committed to international law and that we do whatever we can, whatever feasible, whatever the situation allows us to do in order to limit the effect on non-combatants, people that are not involved in the fighting. We respect human life. Any time that civilians are killed is unfortunate, but the sad reality on the ground is that this is Hamas's responsibility for purposely embedding themselves within the civilian population, firing rockets from within the civilian population in Gaza at our civilians. What we're doing is defending ourselves.
Well, several outbreaks of violence were also reported in mixed Jewish and Arab towns across Israel last night, the most severe in Lod, a city known for its peaceful coexistence between Arabs and Jews. But the recent situation and incitement ignited a mob of Arab residents who raised Hamas flags and, according to Army radio, attacked a school, a synagogue, a pre-army military academy, and city hall, throwing stones and firebombs at Jewish-owned homes as well in the area. 3 Arab men were shot by a Jewish man who claimed self-defense during a confrontation. The Jewish man was arrested. One of the Arab men died of his injuries. In his remarks earlier today, Prime Minister Netanyahu called for Arab leaders in Israel to condemn the rioting, vowing that law and order would prevail. Israel's President Reuven Rivlin shared on social media that he held an urgent phone call today with a chief Arab leader and stressed that the police in Israel will do everything necessary to restore public order with cooperation of the Arab leadership, he said, to bring quiet back to our streets. And unfortunately, another fatality to report to you about tonight at approximately 9 p.m. Israel time. Red alert sirens were sounded in Tel Aviv and the surrounding areas. Hamas had threatened to target the city and claimed to have fired an additional 130 rockets at Tel Aviv. The IDF instructed all residents of central and southern Israel to enter bomb shelters and remain there for at least 10 minutes. At least 8 injuries were reported soon after in the continued attacks, including a 5-year-old girl, as rockets hit the nearby cities of Holon and Givatayim, and a woman was killed when a rocket hit the nearby city of Rishon LeZion. We will continue to report on this very fluid situation with more for you tomorrow. Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Tuesday, May the 11th. At 7 o'clock, it's From the Aleph Bet. At 8, Rabbi David Rosen of the American Jewish Committee moderates a discussion featuring Bahrain's ambassador to the United States, Abdullah Rashid Al Khalifa, the United Arab Emirates ambassador to the United States, Yusuf Al Otaiba, and former ambassador of the U.S. to the Sultanate of Oman, Mark Sievers, in an event of the Association of Gulf Jewish Communities. At 9 tonight, Mark Golub speaks with Murray Greenfield, who shares the story of the historic Aliyah Bet on L'chaim. At 10, Martin Fletcher discusses his book, Promised Land, a novel of Israel. And that's the JBS News Update for Tuesday, May the 11th, 2021. I'm Teisha Bader. Stay healthy. Stay well.